this is a really fine addition to anybody who is modelling the 1980s period onwards. Hi there to you, I hope I find you well. It's great to see you and welcome back to the channel up here to the loft on Weir Yard with me, Jenny Kirk. Now today we're going to be taking a look at an all new Heljan locomotive release, and this is the latest iteration of the Class 86 in the guise of the 86/4. Now just to give you a little bit of a history, we've already reviewed the 86-0 and that video went out a little while ago, but Heljan, not resting on their laurels, are looking to bring out some of the different versions of the Class 86. It was a very long-lasting class and went through a number of changes through their lives, from the original as-built 86-0s right through to the 86-9s that Network Rail use for primarily just making sure that ice doesn't form on the overhead wires overnight when traffic is a little bit lighter in freezing conditions. But these are really exciting because they open up a huge opportunity for some really interesting liveries. They also bring the model bang up to date in terms of its use with operators such as Freightliner. And of course, I'm really excited because my favourite livery is being released, which is the Intercity, and happenstance is such that Heljan very kindly sent over the Intercity version for me to take a close look at and show you guys just what to expect from this model. So come with me in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, and don't forget that we'll be doing a full Dcc fitting guide for this model just to help you guys to work out how to Dcc fit your own. An additional support is provided by Billy's Replacement Speakers, who are managing our entire merch store, which you can find just down below the video, with a full range of hoodies, t-shirts, die-cut stickers and mugs. And also don't forget that we've got an affiliate link down there too, to take you over to Rails of Sheffield to pick up your own version of the Class 86-4 if you really like what you see in today's video. But without further ado, I'm really excited. Let's go take a look. The 86-4 from Heljan follows fairly hot on the heels from the original 86-0, and it comes in the same style box. Now it's a little bit big for my table, it's quite a big box. I'm just going to show you the version that Heljan have very kindly sent over. This is catalogue number 8640, Class 86 Intercity Executive, and this is his locomotive identity 86404. And as you can see, that this is the DCC ready locomotive, and it comes with the 21-pin decoder, working lights and everything else pretty much that you would expect, and suitable here for era 8, although that pretty much means the sectorization period at the point where BR was kind of starting to shadow the idea of privatization, and some of these liveries did carry over into the privatization period. Now the box, again, really nice and heavy duty. It's something that Heljan do really well. So I'm going to get all this out of the box, and we do get a little bit of paperwork as well, and I'm going to take a look at that because there's some interesting bits and pieces in there to just flesh out the actual class history. Standard clamshell packaging, and we do have the couplings here and some extra detailing that can be applied too. Now, just to throw some light on the actual paperwork that comes in this, it's a nice little fairly thin booklet, built here as user manual, with a front end view of what I believe is, it looks like a Freightliner liveried version. And inside we've got the potted history of the class, and I do like it that manufacturers are adding this. So originally AL6, they were pretty much built from the experience that BR had from the classes 81 to 85. And one of the problems that they did suffer was excessive track damage due to the way that the traction motors were hung. And that just basically meant that there was a lot of unsprung weight. So BR looked to find ways to kind of reduce that, and that's where some of these subclasses start to come in. And I actually like the fact that Heljan have given us some information here. So we've already reviewed the 86.0, which was the as-built locomotives, but we basically are looking at the 86.2, the 86.3, and the class 86.4 here, which incorporates the modifications that BR had tried. And certainly as BR was in need of more 100-mile-per-hour express passenger locomotives, all of the remaining locomotives did get converted to have the flexicoil springs, sometimes nicknamed Zebedee, and the SAB wheels, which had a rubber insert which just cushioned some of the track blows as it went at speed over joints and undulations. We also get a bit of information about some of the other classes too. We have some information on the Pantograph, and then we do have this long list of all of the parts that go into these. And recently another manufacturer has shared some photographs of locomotives being assembled in the factories in China, just to show how intricate this work is. And really you can see here that there is a lot of detailed parts that are assembled in these models. We've also got some information on the pantographs. Some of the Class 86s were fitted with the Stone Faverley, and others were fitted with the Brecknell-Willis high-speed pantograph. And I believe that Heljan have tooled up to be able to represent both types of pantograph. Finally, we get some quite important information about the actual DCC fitting, and we're going to be looking into that. And one of the things that, if you are looking for the DCC fitting, stay tuned for towards the end of this video, and we're going to be doing a full DCC fitting guide using the Trainomatic 21-pin decoder. The model also features some extensive space within, such that it makes it a very easy proposition for a sound fitting and also anything else that you might choose to add in, such as extra speakers and also stay alives too. For me, this livery really does stand out. I have a massive soft spot for the Intercity period. There's just something about this livery and regional railways too that I really like. The electric locomotives got the wrap-round yellow cab and this quite interesting black window surround which extends all the way across the front of the locomotives, which gives them a very curious look, almost as if it's wearing some kind of bandit eye cover, but it certainly does make them stand out. And the all-over yellow roof too is really nicely done. So the first impressions of this locomotive are really positive. The roof detailing is probably the area which is most important on an electric class because, as you can see, there is a lot going on the roof, far more so than you would get on any other diesel type locomotive. The pantograph itself is fitted to just one end of the locomotive, and this can be raised with just a careful tweaking, which does take a little bit of trial and error. And for the nervous, you do have to pull a little bit hard, but the pantograph itself is quite robust. That does feel like it's cast from metal components, and there is, once it's up, a nice degree of spring to it, which does mean that if you have overhead electrical wires, this is going to actually follow those wires really quite credibly, and it's certainly a really nice detailed part. But for anybody else, here's a suggestion for you. It is perfectly possible to double head this locomotive with something else, maybe say a Class 47, to represent an electric service that is being dragged away from the wires, something that quite often happened on, say, a Sunday when engineering work was taking place. And then it gives you a really great excuse for an electric locomotive on any layout. Or you could just imagine. After all, it is your railway and your rules. The pantograph itself just clicks back into place, and once you've familiarised yourself with this, it is actually a nice positive lock, and I do like the way it's been designed. It is robust, it's functional, and it doesn't suffer the blight of just randomly deciding to spring up when it feels like it. That is really nicely, positively locked home. We've also got some of these insulators separately fitted with the metal conductive bus wires between them. They really are nice. This is an area of the model that you're going to spend a lot of time looking down on, so it's important that it looks right, and it really does. Heljan have captured this combination of utilitarian and not quite so messy as some of the earlier electric designs, but also the functionality of that pantograph and the other different bits and pieces on there, everything being where it should be, and we've got a lot of separately applied parts. Cab front face does look good. The black band just creeps across that domino head code box, giving a little bit of an unusual profile, but it does look good. We've also got the lights, and the lenses on those really do look like proper glass lenses, and in terms of when this locomotive is functioning, they do provide an adequate amount of light, and as you'll see later on, they are really quite switchable, something that we've called out for a very long time for switchable tail lights, and Heljan have finally delivered it with this particular model. Buffer beam detail is factory fitted at both ends, although unlike the Class 25, we don't appear to have an additional set of spare pieces to be able to remove and replace these if needs be, and certainly you'll have to do some removing of these parts at one or both ends if you wish to put in the supplied couplings. The buffers are fully sprung. They're a little bit stiff on this model, but they are robust, and they stay put when given a tug. I also like the silver there on the shanks, just like the prototypes, and that's a nice touch. It can be quite easily overlooked on sprung buffers, but Heljan's attention to detail means that these do look every bit the part of the prototypes. Looking along the body side, we've got a wealth of subtle detail from this panel here on the cab side, an immaculate printed TOPS data panel. The number 86404 is crisp and sharp, and then moving on to these different bands. This is an area that I've seen Intercity can suffer with a slight fuzziness as the paints kind of run, but on this I'm seeing really nice sharp edges and no sign of blurring or smudging as we look along the side of the model. The recesses for the cab handrails are perfectly proportioned, and the cab handrails themselves are fitted, just recessed into there so that they feel almost but not quite smooth as you run a finger over, and certainly made of what appears to be metal, they are incredibly robust. The doors don't open, but they do look good enough that they theoretically could do, and we've got this peculiar arrangement of the upper and lower door handles in situ. The purpose of these would be, obviously if you were stood on a station platform, you'd use the upper one, but from the track side, the lower door handle allowed the driver and crew to be able to get in and out without having to climb up and sort of hang on the edge of this door trying to get it open whilst precariously perched above quite a drop. This is the business end of the 86.4 variation, the FlexiCoil suspension that helped to just ease some of the pounding that this locomotive would otherwise give the track, and it gave it this very, very peculiar and eye-catching gait along the side, which earned them the nickname Zebedee, with the rolling manner with which they rode on these springs. We also have the SAB wheel sets. You can see that these are not just plain metal wheels, but we do have the accurate inserts to make them look every bit how they should as per the prototype. The rest of the bogie is intricate with a lot of spaces looking through that you can see air gaps where they need to be. A limitation of the model to allow it to negotiate tighter curves than the prototype would ever be tasked with is that there's a little bit of disconnect between the bogie movement and those flexicoil springs. But I think that that's a compromise that I can't see any other way that Heljan could have done it without severely restricting the curves that this model could have got through. And when it's running on the track, this isn't noticeable at all. The rest of the underframe detail is really, really slick. We've got a wealth of separately applied detail, and the finish on the printed parts where we've got the gauge with the red surround and the yellow hinges is really, really crisp and sharp. The two sides of the model do differ as per the prototype in terms of the layout of the body side grills, and these grills, they're not separately applied as far as I can tell, but they are really sharp on the louvre detail. I also like the sharpness of the printing on the BR double arrow. Where it lies, it goes across some of the rivet detail, and this can sometimes trip up livery application, but not so on this model. It still remains sharp, and there's no sign of any smudging where the arrow has gone over that rivet detail. Everything else is captured really nicely, although we do still get a little bit of an edge on the glazing in the cabs and the side doors. But it's not hugely noticeable, but just for completeness I'm pointing it out. We've got separately fitted etched metal windscreen wipers, and these really do look good with this intricate two-shaft design that allowed the blade to remain vertical throughout the full pendulum of the wiper motion. On the front end of the locomotive, all of the jumper cables come ready fitted, and there really is some quite intricate detail. Looking at that is printed onto some relief detail on the body, but it's really sharp and really nicely done. We also have a metal instanted type coupling here, and these are actually fully metal construction and very, very strong. They might get in the way if you are using the tension lock couplings, but certainly if you want to use these as a real working coupling, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. They really are strong enough to be up to the task. On the underside, the locomotive features all-wheel pickup and all-wheel drive. The weight of the Model 2 is quite substantial, and certainly when running, it didn't seem phased at all. I was also very, very impressed with the incredible slow speed running, and I could actually get it to move even without a stay alive on just notch 1 on the controller, with only a very small amount of cogging apparent. And once I sped it up to the point where the cogging disappeared, it was still going at an amazing steady crawl, and it just felt very sure-footed and unfazed by any of the track work on wear yard or the gradients either. When tasked with the train, the weight on this locomotive and the all-wheel drive meant that it was very sure-footed, with no real sign of slipping, even with a long train of Mark I coaches. And I'm in no doubt that the silky smooth mechanism coupled with that drive system would allow this model to pull far more in the way of train length and weight than any model would usually be tasked with, so it's more than up to the task of whatever you are likely to throw at it. When it comes to DCC fitting, we recommend the use of the Train-O-Matic 21-pin decoder, as seen here. But unusually for model locomotives, we don't need a screwdriver to get into this model. Instead, as the instructions recommend, the body is held on with 4 clips. Now, to the unwary, these can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to talk you through this now. On the underside of the model, you can just see, just by the flexi coil, this little indentation, and there's 4 of those, just there and there, and again on the other side. That is where the clips are located, and what you're going to need is something like a card. And what I'm going to do is just get the card inserted, and we're just trying to get the card under the body side. You might need a couple of attempts at this. Just take it steady and slow. Sometimes it helps to have a slightly plastic style card such as this. You can just get in underneath. I get a card in underneath, move my plastic one along, and just repeat this for all four. Take your time. Once you've got some cards in place, and it does look a little bit of a mess, I'm just going to turn this over, and don't do this over a big drop, but just, you're going to just give it a quick knock. And then, as you can see, the body begins to slide off the body, and then we're free. There are no wires that connect inside, so you don't have to worry about snagging and pulling any wires. But once we've got the body off, what I really do want to show you is this cab interior and the detail and the separate livery application on all of those controls. It really is quite splendid, and it strikes me that Heljan have maybe done themselves out of some credit here. These cabs are really, really nice, and switchable cab lighting would have really brought them to the fore. The average 21-pin decoder does have the means to switch extra cab lighting, although this is something that you could add in as an extra little fun project. And it's something that we've done on the Class 25s to great effect. Both ends of the model, the cabs are absolutely sublime. And I just thought I'd pause this DCC fit just to show you these, because I think they are incredibly well done. As you can see here, the decoder, 21-pin, is just on this board. At the other end of the model, there's plenty of space here for a speaker or a stay alive, or even both. And actually, even around the decoder, you can see there's still plenty of space. Getting the decoder or the blanking plate off is really easy. With a flat jeweler's screwdriver, gently ease one side and then the other, and back again. Just rock it a little bit. You don't want to leave it all from one side or you'll bend the pins. And the decoder or the blanking plate easily just comes off like that. When it comes to orientating, just make sure that you've got the decoder the right way round. You'll see the locating slot where there is a single pin and a space, and that matches up with the corresponding location on the pin headers. It does not require force to get this back on. It should just go down, and then a slight push puts it into position. It really is easy like that. We can also see with the body off that we've got twin heavy brass flywheels, and this really does help for super smooth running. Putting the body back on, if you've got a little bit muddled up and you're wondering which way round the body should go, well, there is a handy little picture here on the instructions. So we can see here from the pantograph that we need to make sure that that pantograph is that way round to the detail on the underframe. And that's how we make sure that we get it the right way round when we put it back together. And then it's just simply a case of lining up the body and the chassis. Just very careful not to damage the flexi coils, and just gently work it back in, and you'll feel it clip, and it kind of just grips itself back in, and that's all that you need to do. The locomotive is now DCC fitted. The default address is number 3, but you can reset it to whatever address that you like. We'll take it over to the programming track, make sure all is well, and then we can get it running on the layout. But to haul any train, we're going to need to add one of the couplings. Now, it's one of the things that I have to say, Heljan do have a habit of providing these cranked couplings, which I always find a little bit on the low side. But let's persevere. What I really want to do is to remove the detail from one end and get that coupling put into place. Now, I've got a pair of tweezers, but what I found is that some of this detail is very, very tightly in place. I'm just going to try the other one. And at any rate, if I pull these out, it's going to leave little holes in the buffer beam. So on the basis that this is always going to be tasked with hauling a train of some kind, I'm going to very, very carefully just snip these off. It does feel like sacrilege. These are really incredibly well done. And that will just ensure that nothing fouls the couplings. You may also find that this 3-link coupling does get in the way and obscure the coupling, and it's your choice whether you cut it off or whether you choose to find another way to just keep it from tangling up with the coupling. These couplings are cranked, but they do fit into the NEM pockets, which are fitted on each of the bogies. Now, I tend to find that these can be a little bit on the low side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the factory supplied cranked couplings. Easy enough to just push into place. So to just compare coupling heights, what I've got here is the class 25 from the Heljan stable. And I actually find that it's actually about right. If I just match those up. So actually the factory cranked couplings do appear to be right for this locomotive, which is actually quite pleasing to see. Once on the track, this locomotive was a very sure-footed performer. It handled my full Mark I Intercity rake almost as if it wasn't there, and I rather got the impression that you could have added 3 or even 4 times as many coaches and it still wouldn't have run out of puff. On the goods rake that I've got, it handled the 70 or so 16-ton mineral wagons again without even breaking a sweat. But that is par for the course for this exceptionally strong mechanism that Heljan are so good at these days, and those twin flywheels made sure that it didn't really need a stay alive, and certainly on Weir Yard there were no instances where it felt like it was juddering or struggling even over Inselfrog points or some of the dirtier track work. So we look now to the scores. First up is build quality, and this model seemed exceptionally well made. It's got a great weight to it, and none of the detailing parts fell off, which is always a really good sign, including that buffer beam detail. Actually, I tried to remove some. I ended up resorting to having to cut some of the hoses simply because they were so well fitted that they wouldn't come out. One area though where it did feel a little bit weak is the orange pipe on the side. This suffered a crack with the handling needed to be able to get the body off for the Dcc fitting, and it's a shame in a way that this part is so exposed to the method that has been used to fit the body to the chassis. So I'm going to give this a 9.1. When it came to running quality, I was incredibly impressed by what this model had to offer, and I really couldn't phase it. The slow speed running in particular was incredibly good, and it felt like it had no need for a stay alive. Those twin flywheels really did provide an awful lot of momentum, and overall there's just really nothing to fault. So I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. On Dcc Fitting and Innovation, there's some good points and some not so good points. I felt that the method employed to get the body onto the chassis was just a little bit too firm and a little bit too easy to cause damage when trying to get the body off. On other models, Heljan have used screws to great effect, and I felt that really this model would have benefited from a similar system. Having to get 4 cards and find some clips, pry them loose, and just kind of try and hold the model without damaging any of the detail proved very, very cumbersome. That said though, there is plenty of room inside this model, and on a major plus point, I have to say, I really do like those switchable tail lights. This means that finally we can natively just run a locomotive in a train without its tail lights showing, just like the prototype, but then have the flexibility to show those tail lights if you have the locomotive running on its own. And I think that this is a step that now that Heljan have done it with this model, it leaves you wondering why nobody else is also doing it. DCC makes it really easy to do, and Heljan have shown that with this model, and I think it really is a great subtle step that adds to the functionality and realism of the model. The design of the inside of the cabs was second to none, and I did feel that Heljan could have taken advantage of this by having switchable cab lights using the last two functions available on 21-pin decoders to be able to illuminate that, really just to blow their own trumpet and show off just how good those cab interiors are. But it's an easy enough job to take on as a project to fit separately switchable cab lighting, as we've shown in the Class 25 video. So all in all, I'm going to give this an 8.5. On accuracy and quality of finish, it really is good. I couldn't really find a lot to fault on this, and if I had to pick something, it's just those windows. The edges of those just seem a little bit not quite there. You can see where the inserts for the windows sit against the frame, and for me it's just something that could be improved. So I'm going to give this a 9.8, which does reflect that the rest of this model really is sharp, with the livery application very, very clean and nice. When it comes to value for money, this model comes in at around the £189 mark, which unfortunately is the kind of realms that we're starting to get into for locomotives. In terms of what other manufacturers are offering, this is very much at the lower end of the field, but it is still quite an expensive locomotive, but it does give you a lot for that money. I particularly like the roof detail, and when you think that this is something that you're going to be looking at an awful lot on this locomotive as it goes round, it really is well done. The Pantograph too, I really like that mechanism, so I'm going to give this an 8.6, and that gives us a final score of 46.0, a very credible score for a very credible locomotive. I'd like to thank Heljan for sending this over for review, and certainly this is a really fine addition to anybody who is modelling the 1980s period onwards, and certainly it will be at home in a great many collections. If you don't want to fit catenary on your layout, then as a suggestion, I'd say try double heading this locomotive with something like a Class 47 to represent a train being dragged away from the wires, say on a Sunday for engineering work, and it gives you a great excuse to have an electric on your layout. Or alternatively, you can just do what I do, which is run it anyway, because it's your layout, and this is supposed to be fun. And if you like running electric locomotives without any catenary for them to get their power from, then, well, that's fun, isn't it? Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's video as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. And do you agree with my findings on the Class 86? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section down below. And also, it's a really great opportunity to share with me your own experiences. Is this a model that you've got one of? And, have you found it good? Have you found it bad? Is there something that you think that I have missed in this review? And it's a great way of just sharing that information and observations with other like-minded modelers. And don't forget that if you really like the locomotive featured in today's video, then you can follow the affiliate link in the description box down below that takes you to Rails of Sheffield, where we believe you'll find the best price to pick up your own version of the one in today's review and also some of the other eye-catching liveries. You can also check us out over on Patreon and help us to continue to make the videos that you want to see on this channel. And like, share, subscribe, and of course, most importantly, you take great care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again here next time for the next video on this channel. Take care, happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, and Alan Dickerson. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.